Welcome to Romancing the Threshold. I'm Vanessa Cuto, and today we're entering a kind of chained library, one where ancient wisdom requires the right key to unlock. My guest, Ingrid Kincaid, recently stood in an actual chained library in Hereford Cathedral, where medieval manuscripts were literally locked to the shelves, accessible only to those willing to sit and receive their medicine slowly. It's the perfect metaphor for the kind of wisdom Ingrid carries as a Rune reader, author, and self-described irreverent wise woman. This is personal for me. The things Ingrid said right after my mother died a year ago still resonate, still unfurl. Her medicine takes time, it percolates and reveals itself when you're ready. She's just released her third book, Women of the Always, rooted in wisdom, sourced from the dark. And when a 16-year-old boy saw the cover, an abstract portal in reds and maroons, he looked at her and said simply, "Oh, I get it." That's Ingrid, profound wisdom that crosses generations without explanation. In this conversation, we explore what the runes teach about being in transition, not just passing through. We unpack why romance, the old word for storytelling, might be the key to navigating these times of massive change. And Ingrid shares something I've been sitting with. How do we, as Gen Xers and beyond, learn to elder? Not step aside for the young to fix everything, but step forward with the wisdom only time can bring. So settle in. This is medicine that takes time to unfurl. So, Ingrid, how are you doing?
I'm doing really well. I just came back from a month in the UK, and always takes me about a week to settle into the time change when you're gone that long. And I'm always fed when I travel. That's for me. I don't go as a tourist to be rushing around looking at touristy things. I actually like to walk and feel. It's, where my ancestors come from. It's my, the UK and Scandinavia are my homeland. So that for me is traveling there is always feeding me.
Yeah, I can hear that. I feel the same way when I travel, especially to the UK. I feel very much like my soul goes,
Yeah.
What part?
I was in Scotland for a while. I was in England, and then just took about 4 days on the border, the edge of Wales and England, in a town called Hay-on-Wye, which is very famous for it has 20 plus bookstores in this one little village. And it's just a wonderful, you couldn't even go to all the stores because I'd get stuck in one and just looking at books. And then I never made it to the next one kind of thing. So, and that sits right on the border of
Wales and Scotland, in England.
Yeah. Yeah.
That sounds like a dream to me, a town with bookstores.
Yes, so it was for me. And I also went in, there's a town, Hereford, and it has a really enormous cathedral. In there, they have the, the original library of these ancient manuscripts that are chained, these chained libraries. They used to pull hook them not on the spine, because that made them hard to take out. The pages faced you, and they were chained, and the only way that you could take it off the shelf would be that they had to open it up with a lock, and then the book could be taken off the shelf and laid in front of you and read, but you couldn't steal it. You couldn't take it away. And so I'd never been inside a library that had that old style, and some of these manuscripts from like the 1400s, really, on vellum, not on paper, but on animal skins. So there was a woman in there that was a librarian, and she said, "I think we could probably use this in our libraries to keep people from stealing the books." But this is these heavy wooden shelves, and then these long chains coming down from the books that are through big rings, and then you get to sit with these slanted desks, and students would go in, or still, I think that there's some of the things are still being able to be or are able to be accessed. So for somebody who loves to read and loves to write, it was like candy.
Oh yeah, now just, I'm just here. I'm there, transported, just as you described, I'm, as you're saying too, I'm thinking when I've been to the library at Dublin University,
Yes.
We don't have the chains, but those books in the bookcase.
And did you see the Book of Kells?
Yes.
That was really, I saw that a couple of years ago. I was in Dublin and had the privilege of casting my gaze upon such a magical, these beautiful illustrated, gilded books that they're not throwaway, and they're certainly not, what were they used to call them in Victorian England? Penny dreadfuls?
Yeah, the penny dreadfuls.
Isn't that a great name for a book? A penny dreadful.
I do love that. Yeah. Well, we started talking before I started recording, but since we're talking about books, you've just released the book, so I'm going to just jump ahead completely here.
Go right ahead. Do it.
And I ordered it, and it finally arrived this week. And so I just was going through it and reading parts. It's such a deep book that invites us to romance it in a way. It's not to be, I don't feel like it's a book that we just sit and read, beginning to end. We sit with it. There are so many things, so many different topics you cover. Mm-hmm. Can you tell us a little bit about this book?
Yeah. Would you like to hold it up and show it, or do you?
Well, this is good. This is actually just going to be audio, but I will put it on the show notes.
So the title of the book is Women of the Always, and then the subtitle is Rooted in Wisdom Sourced from the Dark. And as many people know me as the Rune woman, because I work with Nordic animism and rune wisdom. And it's not really deviation from the work I do. It's actually that the rune wisdom informed this book. And probably 20 years ago, I developed this year-long course that followed the phases of the moon through a lunar year. So there are 13 full moons and 13 dark moons in a lunar year. So the book is organized around 26 individual topics, and each topic stands alone, and each topic feeds the other. So it can be used actually as a book, similar to the way that the Artist's Way was set up in the 12 chapters with the topics, and that you could work with it on your own, or you could gather with other women and actually meet regularly and take the topics and talk about them, because the book is full of questions and exercises and quotes. And it's a larger format. I intentionally left lots of space in it. There's bigger margins. It's not just dense text all the way across the page as so often the books are. And there's for me, this kind of a book allows for you to breathe as you're reading. Allows for you to breathe and pause, because it's not just a continuation of on and on and on and on and on. And the topics range from blood and crossroads and silence and darkness and triple. So there's just a whole variety of interesting things that are specific to women, but also valuable and important to men. And the reason I say that is very straightforward, that every person, alive or dead, male or female, lived inside the body of a woman. That's where life started for you.
Mm-hmm.
And that because of that, there's a necessity for men to have different relationship with women because that's from the place from which they were birthed. So I really hold that. It's like, don't think it's just a book for women. Any man that's listening to this, you need to read some of these things because what I believe we are struggling with today is an imbalance. It's not about one being better or somebody taking over. It's about we're completely out of balance with regard to these things. And the other part, I've had a couple of comments. It's an original painting. The cover of the book, front and back, is part of an original painting by an amazing artist, Kate Jacobson, who lives in Minneapolis. And I said to myself when I went to print it, I cannot put the picture of a woman on this book because you cannot make that decision. Like, no matter whose picture or what stylized representation, it would exclude. Mm-hmm. You know, is it old? Is it young? Is she fat? Is she thin? Does she have, dark skin, light skin? There would be an exclusion. So the representation, the stylized representation of this original work of art, which is all done in reds and pinks and maroons, it's like a portal, but it's a vaginal opening. Mm-hmm. When you look at it, in fact, last night there was a young man here with his mom who they came by to pick me up, to take me out to dinner. And he looked at the book and this is a boy that just turned 16, and he looked at the book and he looked at me and he said, "Oh, I get it." There was just this moment that was really precious in that it's recognizable. Mm-hmm. So I am very excited to have it out. There's so much of what's in there that has been, you'll recognize some of the things I talk about because I talk about them in my other two books that are about the runes. So you don't, there's not really a separation. It's a seamless combining for me, weaving of the nature of the work that I do, the wisdom that I share, and what the ancestors have given me. And I do say very passionately, I am an elder. I'm not in my middle 70s anymore. I'm in my late 70s. I consider myself an elder. And there's not a lot out there. When you look across the internet, not that there's anything wrong with the youth, but we need more elders to come forward and to share wisdom from an older, deeper place, because even though the world is moving very fast and we have a lot of stuff that is different, the thing that those of us who have lived through a lot of different times, we can bring that wisdom forward and put it into modern day happenings. And it's not outdated. It's not old fashioned. It's just basic truth that I think we have forgotten that we need. We're a culture that don't have elders.
I'm so glad you said that, because I have lots of conversations with friends. A lot of my friends are Gen Xers, and there's this sense that I pick up from at least the people I'm talking to, where it's like, as if Gen X is like, we're removing ourselves. Let the millennials and the boomers, hash it out. And part of me is like, no. If anything, I do feel we need elders. We need to learn to elder, because you can't go through these times of sort of a heightened transformation, because I think human nature is always going through something. But this feels pretty heightened because, of course, now we have 24/7 things coming at us. But I feel the need for the elders, and I feel then to a certain degree that at least the generation I'm coming from, I feel like we have to elder. We can't just sort of step aside, and turn to the youth and be like, here it is, you guys are awesome, go at it. No, I'm like, you're awesome, you have new ideas, but it's an and both. that needs to happen. So I'm really glad you mentioned that. And also just the feeling of your book, because I have the other books as well. Just a little bit that I was able to read, I felt that it was, the image that came to my mind is like a really well-cooked soup. The ingredients really were slow cooked. And so now that I'm eating it, as I'm reading it, if you will, it feels really nourishing. It feels like it's well melted together. And I feel that elders bring that kind of wisdom that gets to be, if you will, boiled down, melted in a way that when delivered feels very nourishing for quite a while. And I've said to you before we started recording, because I've worked with you before, I feel like what the wisdom you bring to your sessions with clients is that kind of nourishing. It takes some time to unfurl, So I really appreciate that.
Thank you. Yeah. Yeah, it's not a quick fix. And I also think, bless whoever these young people are saying we don't like what you did, but you know what? Just walk up to them and take their phone away. Because this is a whole generation, there's a whole group of young people that can't function. They really can't function in the world without their technology. They don't even know where the sun comes up. They don't know how to find their way on a map. And that it's nice to set us aside and say, oh, we'll leave you to your mess. But like I said, you can't have it both ways. You can't just criticize and still live the benefit. And maybe there's problems that exist because of things that were done. But there's also all the benefits that everybody takes advantage of that wouldn't be there if it hadn't been for the generations before.
Yeah.
And that to me is like you just, it's short-sighted, and there's a level of, I'm not going to say ignorance, but naivety to really, we don't like the past, so we're going to erase it. But you don't live in the vacuum. You don't get to have that. Here we are on a Zoom call in different parts of the city or different parts of the world or different, that makes it possible to do what we do. And that didn't happen by itself. So that's also I would say as an elder and what I call myself an irreverent wise woman. So irreverence to me is like, I'm willing to just call it out. Mm-hmm. You may not agree. I don't care. You get to a certain point and you get to a certain age, it's like, you don't really care anymore. Like, you can do all the flapping around about what's going on, but there's always been change, and there's always been trauma, and there's always been fighting and war, and the way, and I love what you shared as we were talking earlier about the how do we live it? How do we live day to day? How do we navigate things without making everything awful?
Yes. Yeah, because we were talking about, why did I call this podcast Romancing the Threshold? Where did the idea come from? Yeah. And that's why when I was thinking about the podcast and I thought, oh, who would I like to bring, right? You were on my list largely because of the kind of work you do. And I thought somebody who was right there, who's an elder, who understands the threshold, the crossroads of life.
Yeah. But
I was also thinking about, yes, we're going through a lot of things in the world, but how can we approach change? Is happening. It's happening. Things are dying and being born. How can we engage with it? How relate to it with the curiosity of lovers and not just bracing for impact? Because I feel that the constant way we're delivered information, which is very different than wisdom, is like a barrage, just coming and coming and coming. And there's no time. There's no time to just breathe, not let it cook, And so I kept thinking, that I wanted to create a space where I could talk to different people, healers, elders, authors of romance novels, creatives, where we're all in a way working with helping ourselves and others navigate this liminal space that's going on, very pronounced, but how to do it with the curiosity of lovers.
Yeah. So that's a good segue into some of the kind of meditative state I went into before the call, because before meeting with anyone, whether in person or online, I like to spend just silence, usually in the hours when there's not a lot of light, dawn or dusk, that I do that. And I love words, as many people know I do. So I went to the, first I went to the word romance. And romance as a word originally was an adverb, and that it's very interesting because it had to do with storytelling. It had to do with ballads that were chivalrous and about lovers, and it was considered in the vernacular, it was considered less than important in relationship to the Latin texts, the written texts that were in Latin. So this romance also came from a lot of these ballads were written in French. Then we began following that word. We began to move into the Romance languages, which were the languages that originated from Latin but became kind of in and of themselves. And it wasn't until I think the late 1800s that it began to be applied to, like, the novels that we read, these romance novels. So what I thought, because it had so much to do with storytelling, so I thought, this is a perfect, beautiful word, because what's the invitation in that word is things happen. What kind of story do we tell about it? Because I made up the word, or used the word awfulize, that we hear things and we awfulize them and we make them so terrible. And in that, then we choose how we're going to relate to it and how we're going to live with that information and what we're going to talk about. So you bringing in this beautiful word with the history of a chivalrous love poem, could we use that word to ask ourselves, what's the story that I'm telling myself about things that are happening? And so that was where I began, was like this, as a storyteller. What we say when we attach a meaning, it affects how we respond. Then I went to the word threshold, and I kind of worked around with threshold, liminal, and also crossroads. Like, what's the difference with these words? And that crossroads, a coming together of different paths, and it requires at that meeting place to make a decision. There's a choice that has to be made, and there may be only two roads coming into the road you're on, or there might be more. I think about the roundabouts in England or in Paris, where you got 12 roads coming all together. Nobody knows what to do, but somehow they do it.
And when they have a roundabout inside the,
yes,
almost inside the other roundabout.
Yes, most definitely. So here's this crossroads, coming to a place where you decide what direction you're going to go. And you can continue on the road you've been on, unless it's a T intersection. You have to make a choice. You can also turn around and go back, but it's never the same, because you're not the same. And then I brought that into threshold, and I thought, well, with regard to a threshold, we also have to make a choice. Because if you think thresh had to do with stomping, beating, dancing on grain that separated the grain from the chaff. And the hold had to do with the imagined or real barrier that stood between the floor where you weren't threshing the grain and the floor where you were. And now we use it as a description of the place that you have to step across in order to leave one place to go to another. It's still a decision.
Mm-hmm.
And I look at my front door and I think, okay, I can open the door, and I have to ask myself the question. And by the way, I discussed this in the new book in the chapter on crossroads, that I have to decide, am I going to stay inside or am I going to go outside? And in order to do that, I must step across the threshold. But I can also ask myself, am I leaving the inside to go to the outside, or am I leaving the outside to come to the inside? Because this is a two-way passage. Mm-hmm. And that then says to me, there's always a sacrifice. There's always an offering, because when you make a decision, you leave something behind. Mm-hmm. And that if we go through life that way, knowing that no matter where we step or where we go or what we do or don't do, we're making a choice. We may not have choice about what comes to us, but we get to choose the story we make up, how we're going to deal with it. And in order to go outside, I have to leave behind the inside, or vice versa. Mm-hmm. And when we look at that then as, what are you willing to offer up in order for you to have movement in your life? It's not possible. It's also not possible to not move. There's always change every day. But if we approach it from this romance of a story of, oh, I love being inside. However, if I'm going to go plant in my garden, I can't do it in my house. I have to give up the heater that's on or the comfort of my house slippers to go outside to work in the garden. And so it's an offering, but am I wishing I was still inside when I'm outside? And a lot of times people do that. They make up a story about how much they miss something, but it's not possible to have what's next unless you let something go. Mm-hmm. So that was for me really exciting to play with those words and put them together. And then I'm just going to keep talking a little bit, but I got also to the liminal space, which isn't explored a lot, the liminal space. And in order for there to be the space in between, there has to be the duality. There has to be the edges. We can go all as dark and as light, or as, let's say in the seasons. Mm-hmm. But in order for something to exist in the middle, there has to be the edges. Otherwise, it isn't a middle. And even in this, people saying, well, non-duality and non-binary, that doesn't exist in nature. And the runes, that's where I say the runes inform us, is that the runes show us that the gift of the duality or the gift of the binary is the gift of the in-between. Because it allows for us to like, here's the darkest night, here's the brightest day, and then all the beauty that exists between those two exists in the middle.
Yeah.
The sunrise and sunset and the high noon and the middle of the night, and you can see the stars and you can't see the stars, or you can apply that even to sexuality, is that there is a binary that has to exist in the genetics, because there's either the person that can impregnate and the person that can be impregnated. So that's just a simplicity of the biology of the way humans reproduce. But because there's those edges, that end point, it allows for all the different expressions in between. It doesn't discount them. It's not possible to leave that space because everything that's in between exists there because of the extremes. And so that to me then is like thinking of this liminal. What if we thought of the threshold as a space that's very big? That it isn't just this cross point, that we allow for this place of difference, this place of movement, this place of change, to be able to be like it's breathing, so it can get big and it can get small, and it's the smallest of the small, and then it goes all the way out to the edges, and that to me is also about telling a story.
Yes,
where it's having those extremes doesn't mean we have to choose between one or the other. It means that they exist separate and distinct in the fact that they allow everything that's happening in the middle. And to me, that's also making the story. And that's where I believe that in all the years I work with the runes and the ancestors, is that each rune stave, each rune marking represents a being that holds a body of wisdom, and that each rune holds both extremes of anything that it represents. If it's a rune about life, it has to hold death, because you can't have life without death. You can't have death without life. If it's a rune about the mother, it's a rune of birth. But when she gives birth, the thing she gives birth to will die. So the birth rune is also a rune of life and death. Or if it's a Feu, for instance, the rune that is about movable wealth and things coming from the land, well, that's the one aspect of it, and everything that comes from the land returns to the land. So that's the other end of it. And so to me, change is, if you resist it, if you complain about it, if you try to pretend it isn't there, you've actually lost the experience of being alive. You even though you're still living, you're not really living, because you've shut down you've closed the romance. You don't have the curiosity about it anymore.
Yes. Well, thank you. I mean, this is actually one of the names I thought about was Romancing the Liminal, but I ended up going for the Threshold because it felt more, I like the sound of it.
Well, it's tangible also. I think the liminal for me, the liminal is almost in the middle. Threshold is too, but there's a tangible, I like the word because it has a firmness to it.
Yeah.
And that to me is the dot that exists in the middle. That is that one place where you have to make the choice.
Yeah.
Are you going to be here? Or are you going to be there?
Are you going to go in or out?
I think it's beautiful. When you invited me to be part of it and said the name, it was very exciting for me. It's like, well, these are not words we usually put together. Also,
thank you.
There's a invitation, a curiosity just in the way you put the words together.
Yeah. So much more. Thank you for kind of really distilling all that for me. It's good for the branding. I'm going to use them. But a few images came to me when you were talking about that. One was when I was a kid, my mother, I would be running in and out of the apartment to play. And my mother's like, are you going in? Are you staying in or are you staying outside? Make a choice. Yeah. She did not like me just going back and forth. I had to pick. So right there, make a choice. The other thing that I was thinking too about romancing the threshold, the liminal. One is I've always felt that the liminal has its own geography. Mm-hmm. It's a landscape. And that image came to me years ago when my father died, and I was in grief, and all of a sudden I kind of had this sense, I'm traversing a landscape.
Mm-hmm.
And in this landscape that was very liminal, I was meeting different characters, and so at that time I started thinking, okay, who am I meeting? How can I approach this with less tension? So that kind of the origin story, if you will, with my real interest in liminality and the thresholds. Mm-hmm. Being an immigrant, I feel like you're already always on that threshold. You're not, you're always kind of there. But the other thing I started thinking about in terms of what I saw with clients, coaching people around challenges and anxieties about life, and the moment we're all living now, especially in this decade, that I have called it the courageous decade, because this is all hands on deck, feels to me. Mm-hmm. This decade is very liminal. Mm-hmm. There's definitely a before times and an after, and we're in the thick of the middle. But I started noticing not just the fear mongering, because that, the algorithm gods apparently really like that. But it's more the sense that when we're going through change, me personally too, we may cross the threshold and then we're immediately like, I want to get to the other side, can get me out of this middle. The middle can bring a lot of anxieties, mm-hmm. but it's also highly creative. Yeah. And that's where I started to try to focus for my own journeys, but also in thinking, okay, how can we elevate that part? Mm-hmm. Not just focus on the challenge, because sometimes the threshold dwellers, those gods we meet at the threshold, they're challenging ones. They're not easy. They're like big bouncers at at a nightclub. But how do we engage with it in a way that feels more relational rather than it's happening to me? I'm the victim. I'm beneath this, or I'm too small. I can't, does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It does. Well, and it's like the example that you gave about your mom. It was disruptive to her, apparently, to have you coming and going. For mm-hmm. no judgment with that. It just was perhaps disruptive. And we're pretty conditioned. You need to pick one or the other. Mm-hmm. However, I sense the innate curiosity of a child is, why do I have to pick? Because I can constantly be. They live much more liminally in that space of being in motion and understanding that there doesn't have to be a decision, because in truth, you couldn't be inside and outside at the same time. You had to be in the in-between in order to be moving back and forth. And so what I find with people is that there's this resistance to the change because it's frightening. Set aside, okay, there's danger or something's bad going to happen. I'm just, in general, we get afraid of things that are new until we get used to them. And so that fear-mongering keeps us agitated, keeps us off balance. And then it's easier sometimes, I think, to be power-overed or abused by those who are more powerful or louder than we are. And that just keeps us in that space of constant disorientation. And that if we open up the threshold, or go back to the crossroads, even if we go to the crossroads where we have to make a choice, something is happening. It's not always being done to us. It's just happening, and we are here. Wait at the crossroads a little bit and allow it to get bigger, and see who's there, which is what you just described. Is that if we, depending on our belief system, if we really do believe that there are the seen and the unseen, if we believe that the dead our ancestors are around us, can we make that space bigger so that when we're having that experience, we can see or feel or sense how occupied it is? That little point of the crossroads, or that threshold that we step back and forth across, is a whole realm all by itself, filled with the ancestors, filled with the all the beings that exist that we don't see with the human eye. Then you're not it's not just something happening to you, it's actually experiential and it's connected. That you're not by yourself. You always meet yourself at the crossroads. You're always present when you choose to go back and forth across the threshold. I think Rumi even has a poem about that I put in the book, that the door is open, don't go back to sleep. And that's really magical words to think, yeah, if I allow myself to stay here, what else is here? It's not just about something being done to me and then making it, that everything is like so tragic. But we forget the place of life and death, that we can't experience. The cheetah is always going to hunt down the gazelle. The shark is always going to kill something in order to live. What happens with us as humans is maybe we forget that part, that's nature. Earthquakes erupt. Earthquakes happen, volcanoes erupt, tsunamis happen. There's always going to be destruction and devastation. So
and things come out of that.
And things come out of that, like the Hawaiian Islands, right?
Iceland,
Iceland, yes. So it's just this beautiful, and the romance is a beautiful word to use. It's like, can we, in spite of what happens, can we hold a place in our heart where we make love to life? And in doing that, then we don't shut ourselves down and we don't participate in all the anxiety-ridden stuff that's out there. We begin to pay attention to each other, to our neighbors, to how we care about the people that are around us in our neighborhoods, in our cities, and focus on that. What beautiful story can I tell that is going to connect me with someone else who has a beautiful story?
Yeah. When you were talking earlier too about the scene between, the image that I had, I don't know if it was Bede who said it or some medieval thinker, that we're kind of like a bird. We're flying through the window inside the castle hall or the church, and then we fly out. And I kept thinking about the image. We come in and then we go out. We don't know what's happening outside. But in that moment when the bird is on the inside, flying inside, it's kind of like our lives. What are we going to make about this?
Yes.
The whole of life is this great in between. We live in it. And then there are smaller ones, there are phases of life like perimenopause, adolescence, that's a longer phase, or eldering. But then there are shorter ones. You change your job, you move cities, maybe they're short ones. The other image I thought when you were talking about that is when we travel, like you started saying in the very beginning, traveling. I feel like when we travel to another place, we are in a liminal space. We are in a space that is not our ordinary world. And it calls to different parts of us. We have to pay different attention. We don't know our way around. You can't just drive mindlessly. You have to really pay closer attention. And I think that's what's so, for an example, one way to engage with the liminal is notice how you engage when you travel to a different place. How do you deal with those changes? How do you romance that, time away?
Yeah, or do you go as the ugly American tourist that wants everything to be the same when you're going out of the country, you expect them to behave a certain way because that's the best way. Yeah. Well, also when we travel, I think on the physicality level, is that we eat the food there, and that food nourishes our body, and all the minerals and stuff that's in the ground that grew the food that we're eating feeds us. And when we come back home, we bring some of that with us in the form of our physical body. So this maybe is happening more frequently because of ease of travel now. But in the past, not all people traveled. There were people that never left the village, never left the city, and that, or the movement was so slow and took months or years to get to some place. We just have this experience of flying so quickly and easily, and then we forget that, I just spent an entire month someplace. I brought that land back with me. And I took some of my land where I live now with me when I went over there. So that's also like a mixing together of this space that's the action. It's real. It's literal.
Yeah. And in a culture that I feel is unromantic, we have now jet lag. But in a way, the jet lag is how we re-enter back or enter into, because when we fly to Europe, we get the jet lag too. And so it's kind of interesting, this sort of, I feel in our culture, we're very much rushed through, cross the threshold, get to the other part, We don't have a lot of time. Or told or feel like we shouldn't. Yeah. And I even myself suffer with that, sometimes. Like we were talking before we recorded, I had a session with you and you said, you're filling up your basket. And there are moments when I'm like, well, is this basket full or not? I need to get to the other side. Yeah. And then I have to remember, no, calm down. Yeah. But I think in our culture, we have to counter that, because a lot of the messages we have is it's okay to cross, but do it quickly.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, make a decision, make a choice. There's this clock, the clock is ticking. And I think jet lag, for instance, gives us the reminder that the clock doesn't mean anything. It's an arbitrary artificial way of measuring time that doesn't relate, because we as humans, our bodies sync up with the light and the dark. And that's why, if we just fly quickly someplace that's 9, 10, 11 hours difference, it takes us a while to catch up. We call that jet lag, but it's really our body. There's a confusion in the body with regard to the light and the dark, and when I should be hungry and when I should be sleeping. And that it's not yes, it's a thing that we've labeled and diagnosed, or you're suffering from jet lag, but more accurately, your body is confused. Because it's went so fast into another experience that it didn't have time it has to integrate when you get there.
Yeah. And I'm thinking here, when we go through a psychological change, we're going through, let's say you move cities, move to a different city. It's something you wanted to do. It was the thing you wanted to do, even when it's so-called good, you go. But there's still, if you are psychological jet lag, your psyche, your body, is being like, whoa, what's happening? What's going on? And you might feel or experience things that you didn't expect.
Right.
And the sense I have is, as challenging as it is, and I think this is where a lot of the anxiety probably shows up, is when we try to squash it down. It's like, no, this is not the way. But if you were to be like, what are these symptoms about? you know, as Jung would say, the gods become diseases.
Yes.
And so part of me is, how do we romance with these gods then? How do we relate to? What is it trying to show me? What can I show it?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. And I sense that this is also I'm going to bring a rune into the conversation. So there's a rune that's called Jira. It's spelled Jera. So some people might say Jira. And it comes in two different forms. So one form is a single vertical line, and it has two like little thorns pointing out from their greater than, less than symbols, but they're pointing away from on each side, away from the single line. And then the other form of Jira is that it's these two greater than, less than symbols that aren't touching each other, but they're kind of stuck together.
Facing each other.
Facing away from each other, but kind of, like inside of each other. And for me, the one form where they're attached to the vertical line is that it's the turning of the wheel of an entire season entire year of seasons. So that, let's say I use that in example actually in the writing of one of my books. My father died in the fall of a year, and I decided to walk every day to remember his death, and I do it every year. So, every season of the year. So I walked every day through the winter. That was the first winter without my father. I walked every day through the spring, summer, fall. Came back around to the time that he died. So I had actually experienced the turning of that wheel for an entire year through all the seasons. After that, I did that. Then it's like that rune form separates from the east, the single vertical line, and these two shapes, lesser than, greater than, started moving around kind of on their own, like a gyroscope. They're still turning and they're still moving, because the next winter was I still didn't have my father. My father had died. So it was a winter without my father, but it was not the first winter without my father. We can only have the first winter without your mother or your father. You can only have that once. And then every year afterward is still a year without your parents, but it's not the first year. And so the form of that rune gives that opportunity to consider that experience in a different way. And the reason I'm bringing it up is that so often in our society of wanting to rush through, go out, come in, step across the door, get over it, whatever, we jump sometimes to one experience, from one experience to the other, without giving ourselves the opportunity to go through an entire literal year of all the seasons and all the changes, and to see what it feels like. Let's say you ended a relationship. What does it actually feel like for you to go through an entire year, the winter, the spring, the summer, the fall, without a partner? Because very often I'll end this relationship. Well, then 2 weeks later, I'm into another one, and I end that. And then 6 weeks or 2 months. And we don't give ourselves the gift of actually having the experience. We just jump into the next thing. And I feel like that there's an incomplete there that gives us this feeling of loss, and we think that we can satisfy the loss by jumping to the next and the next and the next, rather than giving ourselves the time to experience the wisdom of the turning of the wheel of the seasons. We live on the earth. We're fed by the earth. We return to the earth. we are synced up with the rhythm of the earth, and it isn't fast. It's slow.
It has a rhythm.
It does. It does.
It has a rhythm.
So that would be one of the questions you'd ask before our call was like, how do the runes, what do they teach about these liminal spaces or thresholds or change? And I would use a rune like that as it's not a teaching, it's not a law, it's just giving you the reminder of how the earth works, because that for me is what the runes show us over and over again, is that they are universal wisdom that carries an energy that applies to all people in all places in all time. The earth still turns a certain way, and there's still the change of the seasons, some places more drastic than the others. But when we create the imbalance in our lives, or we ignore something so imbalance is there, like we're always agitated and we're always worried and we're always afraid, and then there's no way that we can be in harmony with the seasons and the cycles, because nothing on the earth is always the same. We can count on the cycle, but every time that it comes around, it's different.
Yeah, it's the same and different.
Exactly.
It's interesting. You a few things you mentioned there. I was thinking, one, it's actually been now a year, a little over a year now since my mother died. So I've gone through all the seasons with that. And when my father died, I remember walking a lot too. Maybe not, I didn't have the intention as you had, but I did a lot of walking and noticing. But one thing that I remember that really helped me was, because that was the first death that I had, that really was pronounced. Grandparents didn't affect me as much, but my father was the first one. Even though as a kid, I remember other deaths in the family, but hey, I got to see him die. And the stages of grief didn't work for me. It made me anxious. Until I realized I was in this landscape, and I realized that it was, I called them the three goddesses to me. It was Lady Death, Lady Grief. I used to call her Lady Grievana, and in my mind, she looks like Helen Mirren. I just like her to look like Helen Mirren, and then it was Lady Joy. And I remember that once I understood that I couldn't drive through this landscape, I couldn't fly over it, I had to walk it. And I think in a lot of the dreams I've had that are related to that, I can't find the car, I can't fly, I have to walk.
Yeah.
And I'm walking, and I would say sometimes to myself or closer friends and say, I'm having tea with Lady Grievana. I got to spend time with Lady Grievana, have my scones and tea before I can meet Lady Joy. And so once I that lives in my imagination. Lady Death, Lady Grief, Lady Joy, they're sisters. And you can't go from one, you can't skip it. And it really helped me. Once I had that, I was like, oh, okay, sometimes I'm just having tea and scones with Lady Grief.
Yeah. And that's not formulaic. I think sometimes when we get these, there's certain stages of grief, and you need to do this and do this and do this and do this. And that's that written in stone kind of imagery that serves well for religions that make rules and commandments and regulation. And life isn't like that. It's like, well, today I'm going to stay home and have tea and scones, and tomorrow something else. And that's, I think, it's more about relationship. It's about being aware, slowing down, connecting, and asking yourself, like, what am I called to do today? What do I need to do today? Not where should I be in this timeline? And that how, by living from that place of paying attention it allows for you to have all the experiences, but not in a sequential line. I laugh about that. Some of these spiritual practices, like in the witches community, and you have to put your candle here and your water here and your incense. And I tease and say, stand on one leg and whistle and spit over your shoulder. Somebody made up some real formula, and maybe in general it works, and maybe that's lovely. But if it doesn't, it's not because there's something wrong with you. It's because you just experience things in a different way.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, the same with, like, we get caught up in all the stuff that's happening right now because there is a lot of change, but there's always a lot of change. People were afraid of electricity when it was invented. People were afraid to, there was a time when women weren't allowed to ride bicycles because it was considered to be dangerous. A bicycle was dangerous to a woman, and as we talked earlier, it's like, well, I think we're facing crazy things right now, but Second World War was horrendous stuff that changed the world, and that we faced the dropping of atomic bombs.
Yeah.
And they could have, it's not that we have to always be comparing, but to pay attention to the fact that every season, every generation, every decade has something monumental that defines it, that we speak to, and we can't say it's worse than anything else or better than anything else because we didn't live then.
Yeah. And also even how we engage with the change ourselves. Like, I felt the grief of my father very differently. I was younger. I was in a different stage in my life. Now I've journeyed with grief in a different way, different stage in my life, different relationship, not the same with my parents. And so I think even the changes within our lives are different.
Yes.
You can move to a different job or a different place and you have your certain kind of experience and then you do it again. You're a different person. Yeah. What I think about sometimes that I guess in a way worry is not quite the word, but I'm a little concerned when I see this, is that when we're going through collective changes or even personal changes that are more emphasized, we are not giving time to see what images are rising. We don't pay attention. We see the event, we see the choppy waves, and we get really perhaps stressed or worried. But underneath it, there's something, but we're not giving ourselves time to do that. And so I do feel that because we didn't notice, they come back. Now they're going to come back, perhaps turn up to 11. Like a nightmare. It's like, hey, I'm trying to send you a message. Here it is. I'm going to really knock on your door. And so sometimes, and kind of like in fairy tales, when the monster shows up, pay attention. There's something to that. We're going to feel fear, but what is it trying to ask us?
Yeah.
And so that, again, back to the idea of the romance, is like, how do we engage with what's showing up so we don't get caught up with the choppy waves? Oh, this person did that, this did that. But we go underneath and be like, oh, what is really it? So I tell my friends sometimes, don't pay attention so much to the name of the criminal. Pay attention to the crime.
Yeah.
That's where it's at. And so I feel what's needed now is these stories where we're invited to be like, what are the images that are rising and how can we relate to it differently? Don't just show me.
Yeah.
Show me how to relate to it differently. I don't know. That's my sort of... And just one last thing. I also think that the world of the in-between, this liminal space, has different characters, kind of like the other world. And I also think while perhaps not all of them are really even paying attention to us, don't care about us, could be all kinds of things, I do feel that some of them want to help us. Because what happens in our world affects their world and vice versa. I think it's vice versa. It's not just us. And so I think some of them are trying to reach out and be like, engage with us. We can help, like the ancestors, but even beyond that.
Yeah.
And so I think that's why when the images to me show up, kind of like I had the Lady Grivana show up for me, I was like, oh, okay, now I can be with this space in my life differently.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yes. Well, definitely. Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's about moving fast and moving more slowly and not just looking at the surface, like you said, and go deeper. Yeah. All right. And it's also this picking sides as to this is bad and this is good, which doesn't allow for the in between either.
Yeah.
What's the crime? So let's say take the very controversial issue of abortion, and you can have women who say, I'd never kill my baby, and another woman would say, if I needed to, I would. May even kill a baby is charged in the way I said it. I apologize for that, but to stay pregnant or to terminate a pregnancy. But what's the crime is when the choice is taken away, not whether one woman would or one woman wouldn't. Because it's the choice to be able to choose whether you would or wouldn't. And we can if we come together on something like that. Like I've given birth to 3 children, and I would say, well, just sitting here, I don't believe I would have ever considered having an abortion. But that doesn't serve any purpose whatsoever because I never had to face the decision.
That was not a threshold. That was
yes.
That you had to cross.
Another woman might say, well, if I didn't want it, or it would ruin my career, or I thought it was defective, I would. So we can hold very different places. What is the crime is that the ability to choose for ourselves what we would or wouldn't do has been taken away from us. The ability to choose. I mean, we still might choose it and put our lives at risk. But when legislation or whatever comes and says, you no longer have the right to choose, we're going to choose for you. And so that then could bring us both together. Because if I want to choose to have it and she wants to choose not to have it, or vice versa, where we can stand together, and it's not about how we live our lives. It's often how the right to be able to make a choice in your life is taken away. And that's what I think is happening, where we divide each other and we don't allow for ourselves to be in that middle place, that I can hear your story and you can hear my story. And not that we don't have to agree, but what we can agree upon is that the right to be able to choose for ourselves how we want to live our lives.
The sovereignty of how do you engage with whatever choice threshold you have to cross.
Yes.
Because
that's the romance parts.
Yeah, because there have been, and I've known, friends and clients who they may have had children, but that at some point in their lives they had to choose to terminate.
That's right.
It wasn't so black and white.
Yes.
And so I think that it comes back to the idea of sovereignty of self. We, at the end of the day, however things are structured, we have one undeniable choice. How do we relate to what is?
Yes. Yeah.
That is the choice we got, really. And other choices can be taken away, can be given back. But how we relate to it, it's where it's at, I think.
Yeah, and that goes back to me, the romance part, which is that it originally was about telling a story. That word originated with having a tale or a story that had to do with chivalry and had to do with love.
Has to do with love, yeah. Which comes back to me to the Venusian principle of relating.
Yes.
Right? It's how do we relate to this? And we can change how we relate. I can start in it could be like the tropes of romance novels. You could start enemies to lovers, you start hating it, right. Then you love it. It's a forced proximity, all the tropes kind of work because of that. In a way, we're living it that way.
We do. Yes, we do. We are living the penny dreadful, right?
I do think, and kind of what you said about the troubadours singing those ballads, that was sort of, even then, it was respected but kind of poo-pooed because it wasn't what was in the church books. Kind of still today. Yes. We consider these fluff books, fluff shows. Oh, they're nothing. They're nothing. They're guilty pleasures. But I feel that they carry mythic medicine because they're really tapping into what the zeitgeist is needing.
Mm-hmm. They're giving the images of the mythologies, of the fairy tales. That's what I sense, is that we learn things through the fairy tales, and they're pretty consistent throughout time as to the themes of fairy tales in lots of different cultures, and that we're not making up new fairy tales, but we really are in the romance.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Although my husband is a huge fan of Star Wars, so he was telling me about the whole expansion of the Star Wars universe, and I'm like, wow, they're really creating a massive myth,
Yes.
Tapping into. So we keep creating, and I wonder how, going back to what you mentioned about the choice of what we do, terminate or not terminate, and that's just one of the heavier choices to make. I don't think anybody really does that lightly. That's at least the impression I have, and also sitting with clients, I don't think at least was an easy decision. But it's the stories we tell around that, and I feel that one place that we can bring our energy now to, and is how our imagination is working. What kind of stories are we allowing to impress upon us? Mm-hmm. What kind of images are we swallowing whole and not even thinking about what we're swallowing whole? Yeah. But I do feel that we do have the potential to use better images and better stories. And I hope and I feel people are hungry for that, because what is being fed to us, a lot of it is not nourishing imagery.
Right. Yeah. Well, it's fast. It's the fast food compared to the fine wine and the aged cheese, right?
Yes.
And the sourdough bread that rises slowly.
Yeah. So, I guess one, we're coming to the end here. As you said, as an elder now, how do you find yourself romancing your own thresholds in this phase of life?
Mainly for me is acceptance. Mm. So I would use that word, being comfortable with and joyful about what's actually happening to me. Mm-hmm. And the acceptance of that. I'm not 20 or 30 or 40 or 50 or 60 or 70 even. And so the changes that happen in your life go hand in hand with the wisdom that you gain. And so I love to travel. I have to make sure that I don't make connections too brief, because I can't run in the airport type of thing, or pack my suitcase too heavy because I can't lift it. I mean, those are really practical day-to-day things, but to embrace and accept how the magic of my body, or all people's bodies as we age. And it just like when you have children in each early childhood, each year, that you can see really rapid difference between a 1-year-old and a 2-year-old, that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. It's happening. The aging process, it happens that way. It flips, and you age as rapidly as you grew into out of childhood. And so I believe instead of focusing on, this eternal youth and perpetuating, like age-defying creams and all the things that everybody's fixated on, because nobody wants to admit that we're in the dying process. To me, that's also telling this story. I'm in the stage of my life where I'm dying. That's the truth of it. And yes, you can do certain things, eat better, exercise, sleep good, all of that, and you're dying. It doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm.
Because you can do all those things and drop dead at 50 jogging.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah.
So there's a gift in getting old enough to actually slow down, because your body's slowing down and your energy. That, I think, is also part of what brings the wisdom in, because things are happening and you just go quickly from one thing to the next. When you're younger, you have more energy, you have more stamina, maybe you're stronger. So for me, this growing old in this time of my life is to be slow enough, and maybe that's a gift my body gives to me. My body says, we have to do things differently. I've served you really well. You've walked on these feet for a long time, and I took you where you wanted to go, but today they hurt. So just sit down. And in that is the wisdom of being slow. So today I'm sitting in the hotel room writing about what I saw yesterday when I was walking the streets, that kind of thing. Does that answer it?
Yeah. Yeah. I think acceptance is huge. Once we accept, then we can relate to it differently. We're open now.
Yeah. And why would sometimes you read, you see these like personal ads or whatever, men, women, it's like, well, I'm 50, but I feel 20. Well, or I look like I'm 20, or I look and feel like I'm 20. It's like, why the heck would you imagine that you wouldn't change from 20 to 50? How could, something's really missing here. How do you know what you were supposed to look like when you got to this age? And if you're telling me that you haven't changed in 20 years or 30 years, you're either blind or stupid.
I do feel like I'm more worried, like nothing changed. We have bigger problems here.
We got a bigger problem here. Right.
We need a bigger boat.
Yeah. So to me, that's that place of, there's a certain level of denial within our culture that anti-aging, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, we're going to pretend like, I think it was James Hillman in his book, The Force of Character. He said that he thought that facelifts should be illegal because the thing is that energetically, my face tells the story of my life, and that if I come to you as an old woman, but my face is a lie.
Mm-hmm.
Then there's a disconnect there, and as in our animal selves, we don't trust it.
It's true. Yeah.
Because there's something that's happening here that doesn't sync up. And that's not to say you can't, I'm not saying don't get plastic surgery or don't color your hair or whatever. That's everybody's choice. But I think it's the energy, it's the story that you're telling yourself, that there's a pretense or a denial rather than an acceptance of what happens to everything on earth as it ages, because we don't mature and stop there. We mature just like a apple on the tree gets ripe, and it doesn't get riper and riper and riper. It gets ripe and then it falls off the tree and it starts to rot. That's what happens to humans.
Mm-hmm. I think, one, back to the big fear of death. That's the real big one. Everything to me revolves around that fear.
Yes.
Keeping youth, not wanting to cross thresholds for change, not wanting to see X, Y, and Z, because there's this inherent fear of death.
Yeah.
The other thing I think about is if we look to nature and the planet, if we were to think of this planet as like a video game, it has a certain code of how things work here. It just is. There's day and night. There's sun and moon. Like you're saying, there are the two edges. The whole in between is a spectrum, but there are the two edges. And there's a rhythm. There are the seasons. There's death. Death is inherent. Death and life go together here. And so sometimes I think if we were to just look at how nature has structured things, like that's the program. Mm-hmm. That's how the program runs. That's the code, to use the computer jargon. We still go back. I can still go back to, we have the choice to how we relate to these. That's where we can create all these stories, and these myths have come from that, the fairy tales and all that. But I do feel that when we're living in times of intense change, then we need better stories. Mm-hmm. We need to look at, but let's look at the ebb and flow of everything. This is a core program on this planet. There's a natural duality to things. Yeah. We can't live forever in summer, which is akin to the people who run companies wanting to have more profits. It never ends.
There's higher and higher. I want a higher wage, okay, but if we pay a higher wage, are you willing to pay the higher price? I mean, it's just that's true. It's like that's that purpose driven, that you're going towards something rather than you're returning.
And allowing it for the return, right? You can climb the mountain, but you need to rest, and you need to come down the mountain. Right. And so I think it's the dance. Mm-hmm. And I'm just hoping that we have more people, like you said in the beginning, more people who step into the elder and really step it up. Mm-hmm. But I'm also wondering more people to bring in different imagery.
Well, right. And I feel like if we have a foundational piece of this older wisdom, it provides the container for the young ones coming in with the ideas and the creative things, and that instead of denying or pushing something away, asking what can we co-create, mm-hmm. what can we bring in that's different, that rests upon the foundation, even though, maybe the foundation isn't good, but you can't just destroy that, because where you're at exists because of it. And then how can we modify or build a different way, structure something differently, because we're recognizing the weakness or the strength of the foundation piece. Mm-hmm. If we don't have a body of elders, then it's like a denial of the ancestors,
and the denial of where we're all heading there in some shape or form. We're going to go in that direction. That's a certainty.
Well, and we think about ancestors as being the past, but they actually are our future also, because that's where you're headed.
That's true.
So this is the cycle to me. It's like, well, my ancestors are behind me, but they're also in front of me, because I'm moving in the direction of where they are as they are behind me. And that's the beauty of this it's not a timeline that's linear, but it folds back and becomes itself. Mm-hmm. And that's also magical. It's like, that's also why I think we repeat, but it looks different, but it's a repeating of the same thing.
Yes. Yeah.
It's like we're facing global change and catastrophe, and we want to make it all about us. But all we have to do is look at the geology of the earth, and we know that there has been cataclysmic change on the earth over and over again, that there have been ice ages, and there have been, oceans in the middle of Utah type of thing. The earth has always had major change. So it's not a surprise that we're in a cycle of climate change, because the climate had to change before to have something like that happen.
It's always changing.
Always changing.
I do think as humans, we're funny.
We are
We
funny.
both crave change. We wanted the adventure and the exploration, but we also don't want to do it. We want to stay put and stay comfortable. And so
We don't want to get old, right?
but then also when we are younger, we were like, gosh, I can't wait to grow up and be able to do the things I want to do and not have my parents tell me what to do. So we are a paradox.
Yeah. But that's what keeps us going.
It keeps us on the cycle.
Yep.
So, and towards now that we're wrapping up, is there anything you feel like you could share or you would like people to walk away with when they are thinking of their own thresholds in their lives or how to navigate these times that call on so much change?
Well, what I would offer is to remember that time of change is not anything new or different. That we all of us always live in a time of change because everything changes all the time. So that, and I, as in the book Lost Teachings, which I really love to recommend using as kind of like a map for life, is that if you get up every day or go to bed each evening and step into this, imagine yourself stepping into the middle of your own life and just standing there and asking those questions like, who am I and what time is it and where am I and what do I really need? And that's just a very simple centering practice of recognizing that moment by moment, what we need changes based upon where we are and what time it is and which way the wind is blowing. And that if we each day remember who we are individually, it allows us then to navigate change, cross the thresholds, meet at the crossroads, all the things we've talked about. But we always come to that space as ourself rather than how do people want me to show up? What does somebody expect that I need to look like or how I need to behave, or here's a rule to follow. That each day you come to your own center and look around you and just quickly ask yourself, what do I actually need today? Not what do I think what am I wanting, or how do I hope this is going to happen, or I wish the world was different. But in this moment, how can I be myself? And I would say that that's a great place to start. It's not about a rule. It's not about a formula. It's not about a quick fix for anything. It's just every single day being with yourself long enough to tap in and feel. And that's truth telling. Most of us don't take the time to do that. And it's and it doesn't have to be some big ritual. You don't have to light the candle or hum or sit on a cushion and ring a bell. It just you can get up out of bed and stand there for a moment and just ask yourself, who am I today?
And what do I need?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And our needs are dependent upon where we are and what time it is, really. Like where are you globally, but also where are you in your life? And what time? Well, it's winter time. No wonder I feel sleepy. It gets dark early. Just stuff like that. That's just simple. Mm-hmm. It's so monumental when we learn to live in that space that exists. That's our space. That's the in between.
Mm-hmm. We are in it. The big in between. This is it. We are that little bird flying from one. I
love that. That's beautiful. Good memory. A good reminder that when you're flying through the space. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I would end with always the question people want to know how to find me.
Yes.
Well, it's very simple because it's my name. My name is my website. So it's just ingridkincaid.com. And if you want to email, send it to Ingrid at ingridkincaid.com. There's no complexity there. And on my website, you can find out about my books, and you can find out what I offer as far as one-on-one counseling or spiritual counseling or coaching or, any of those kinds of things, or working with the runes. And there's a lot of downloadable classes that I've taught in the past that you can buy off my website and have them to listen to. So that's just simple as that. It's just my name.
Yeah, and I'll of course add that to the show notes. And like I've said before, I've worked with you with the runes before, and I highly recommend, because it's it unfurls with time. Yeah. It really seeps in there, and it works through you. So I really recommend that. But I'll add that to the show notes, of course. And I highly also recommend people check out the other books as well. It's one of my favorite rune books, but the latest one that just came out. Yes. I'll add that too. Good. Ingrid, thank you for crossing this threshold with me.
Yeah. Lovely. I love the words together. I love the concept. And I appreciate that you invited me to join your podcast.
Thank you. Thank you. What stays with me from this conversation is how Ingrid transformed the word romance back to its roots, storytelling. The question isn't whether we will face thresholds, but what story we will tell ourselves about them. As she reminds us about crossroads and thresholds, even if we try to go back to where we came from, we've already been changed by the journey. The person who returns isn't the same one who left. We don't get to choose what changes come, but we do get to choose the story we tell about them. Are we awfulizing, or are we romancing? Are we resisting or staying curious? And maybe, most importantly, are we willing to elder? Not in the sense of growing old, but in bringing forward the slow-cooked wisdom that only comes from living through many crossings. As Ingrid says, we can't just step aside and let others figure it out while we live off the benefits of what came before. We need to translate ancient truths for modern times. So I'll leave you with this question. What story are you telling yourself about the threshold you're standing at? And what would it mean to approach it with the curiosity of lovers, not conquering uncertainty, but courting it? Until next time, this is Romancing the Threshold. May your crossings bring you home to yourself, changed.